disinformation is information that the purveyor knows is incorrect and spouts anyway.
You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving, Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that.
The shooter was not from this community. In fact, the shooter traveled hours from outside this community to perpetrate this crime on the people of Buffalo.
Many people who receive and are fooled by disinformation are then inclined to act on this information. They feel like they need to do something, often to take revenge, even if the information that they've received is not true.
So in 2016, when President Trump, or then candidate Trump, liked to use the term fake news, it was often labeling something that was politically inconvenient for him.
They are the fake, disgusting news.
I'm Will Carlos. I'm the extremism and emerging issues correspondent for USA Today, and I've been covering the radicalization of people and movements for years. Disinformation, especially in politics, isn't new. It's been part of our system since the birth of democracy. The right to free speech is so deeply enshrined in America that propaganda has been tolerated in order to protect this precious freedom. But there's no doubt these days, because of the internet and especially social media, we're dealing with an ever-evolving disinformation landscape.
Back then, I had to search it out. I actually found a book at the library that had addresses. It was written by a sociologist, and there was addresses in the back of the groups that participated in the study, and that's actually how I made contact. Then compared to now is a totally different world. Even getting involved, like now a person can just enter in the website on a computer or Google it and find these groups very easily.
For me personally, I was, pretty hardcore into the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I followed, President Trump, on all of the websites, he basically put out, come to Stop the Steal rally, and I felt like I needed to be down here.
Mr. Ayers, when you entered the Capitol last year, did you believe that the election had been stolen?
At that time, yeah. Everything that I was seeing online, I definitely believed that that's exactly what that was the case.
And when you heard from President Trump that the election was stolen, how did that make you feel?
Oh, I was very upset, as were most of his supporters. That's basically what got me to come down here.
Gas! We need you. God bless America.
We tend to disagree a lot. I think the government has been dishonest with us, yes, in a lot of things, but specifically with this situation, the pandemic situation, I think there is like a movement, it's a like a negative propaganda behind this that we really don't know, but it's to bring some type of chaos to society, some type of division to society.
Susie Calderon gets most of her news from Miami's Spanish-speaking radio stations, some known for spreading disinformation. She falsely believes former President Donald Trump won the 2020 election.
Trump won in a landslide, and they all know it.
This has caused years of contention with her daughter Amore.
our conversations were not conversations. I'd like leave crying or upset, and like it'd be like, I can't believe you believe this stuff or support that.
Latinos for Trump! Latinos for Trump!
Disinformation is especially effective with Spanish-speaking Americans. Nielsen research says that's because many rely heavily on social media and messaging platforms that lack adequate Spanish-language fact-checkers.
I think if we're being honest, most Americans are not fact-checking. They follow sites that are aligned with their beliefs and values, and they believe whatever is being shared.
I will love her always, no matter what. It doesn't matter which way she thinks, you know. She will be always my daughter, and I will always love her.
My sister became involved in politics heavily during the 2016 election. She started posting all kinds of QAnon links. Everything on her page, instead of being about family, became QAnon. As the pandemic continued, it became worse and worse and worse.
Angela formed an online support group for families who've had loved ones become involved in QAnon. She's asked that her last name not be shared.
I had no idea when I began this group how many people were dealing with this situation. I had no idea the hurt and the devastation. What I want people to understand is they're not doing it because they're stupid or lack intelligence. In fact, many of the people who believe in QAnon are very intelligent people. They have been manipulated.
Psychological manipulation is not a new phenomenon. Diane Ben-Scoter knows how easy it can be to fall for disinformation and manipulation. She is the founder of a group called Antidote. It helps people overcome psychological manipulation.
I think it's so important to understand that disinformation is a tool. People have human vulnerabilities especially during times when the world is a confusing place to live. And when it's hard to know who's telling the truth, when it's hard to know what to trust, when the world feels like it's changing quickly.
Diane says simply focusing on stopping disinformation isn't enough.
It's so important to think of this as a public health problem, because there's no way to know who has the kind of vulnerability that would quickly escalate them into a potential lone wolf type shooter. If you have a loved one who you feel like you've lost to conspiracy theories, the first thing you have to do is educate yourself about what psychological manipulation is. These are still the people that we love. It's just that they've been taken advantage of.
Have I ever come across disinformation? Yes, certainly. I think like a lot on like social media apps. It seems like there's a lot of stuff on like Facebook and like TikTok and like apps like that like where people are kind of trolling things.
Social media was never meant to be the source of truth. You know what I'm saying? It was just meant to be a platform for people like myself to say anything we want. And that's what's happening.
I mean, when I'm watching the news and on TV, I go back over there on the internet to see, it's comparable what they said. This is the way out. Find out. I don't know if this is real or not.
A fact is something that is knowable and provable, not subject to interpretation or personal perspective. Now, there might be a fact that's inconvenient to one person or one perspective or one party, and that doesn't make it any less of a fact.
Facts are Eric Litkey's specialty. As a USA Today fact checker, his workday is dedicated to finding them.
So we have a team of reporters that's using a variety of tools to see what is circulating on social media, and then we're kind of making a series of assessments. Is it something that has a big enough impact that we really feel like it's worth our time to intervene and say, no, that's not how this works?
But the increase in alternative media sites that don't follow basic fact-checking guidelines creates tremendous challenges for people like Eric.
I get all my information from the internet, 100%. I don't watch TV, so that's where I get my information.
So it's not just that I have this perception of the world, it's now I can go find this group of people that shares this muddled, confused, flat wrong worldview, and we can all get together and say, yeah, we are all right and everyone else is all wrong. And so that really kind of radicalizes in a way, it reinforces these wrong viewpoints that people have.
I remember there was a lot of disinformation around people denying like that January 6th ever happened and things like that on Facebook. I know like there's a whole like crew of people out of there kind of like saying that never happened.
The news, they don't tell the truth about, what happened in Cuba, what happened in Ukraine, what happened in Russia, and what's going on real happened in the United States.
I think especially when the pandemic started, I saw a lot of misinformation about that. People just saying like it was not really a real issue and like that the vaccine was poisonous, things like that. I saw a lot of that online for a while.
Eric says professionally fact-checking requires much more work than most readers realize.
The research process itself starts with reaching out to the person who made the claim. We always want to give them a chance to defend it, offer any evidence they may have. And then we're finding our own experts. And that's kind of that process of saying, for this niche topic, whatever it is, what experts are best situated to speak to this, that they have experience, they have the degrees, and then that we can trust that they are going to come into this cleanly, if there's not a bias or something else that they might bring into it. And then talking to a couple of them to make sure that we have really an understanding of what's the expert consensus here, that we didn't just happen to talk to that one guy who really disagrees with the rest of the people in that field.
Older generations are more likely to spread disinformation or fall victim to disinformation. But I would say that everyone is frankly potentially a victim of disinformation, especially around these polarizing issues. A lot of people don't recognize that the most engaging content on social media is the most enraging content.
Social media plays a huge role in most teenagers' lives. A survey shows 90% of teens 13 to 17 years old have used social media. 75% have at least one social media account, and 2/3 have their own mobile device with access to the internet. That means most young people stumble across disinformation every single day.
The goal for today is for us to continue to think critically about our core democratic values.
Patricia Hunt is a social studies teacher in Arlington, Virginia. She's teaching media literacy in her classroom with help from the nonprofit The News Literacy Project.
My goal as a social studies teacher has always been to get students to be skeptical of what has been laid down as the truth.
Things come at kids fast. Adriana Shavira spent years as a reporter before becoming a high school journalism teacher in Los Angeles.
We definitely look at, I always tell the kids, look for a credible source, and we go over, what are some of the sources where they get their news. As the years go on, students, I see more and more students getting their news from social media. And so one thing that, they need to learn is to, okay, where's the person that you're seeing on that TikTok video? Where are they getting their sources? I've kind of taught the kids that, if they hear something from one side, go and see who else is reporting it and see whether is it true. If you don't find it anywhere else, then, most likely it's not true. I sometimes, show memes in the classroom just to identify or just to give examples of how some things that went viral are maybe not true.
She says there are plenty of examples of disinformation on the internet she can use as teaching tools.
There was some floods or storms, I think in Florida, and, we saw on the internet or on social media images of flooded freeways with sharks running or with sharks swimming in them. And so that was an example of, a lot of people, I think those memes definitely went viral, and kids, thought that they were real, or some people, even probably adults, thought that they were real. And so, if, there were some sources that fact checked those and said, okay, that's, fabricated, it's not real. And so just, teaches the students that, what you see on the internet isn't always real.
But implementing a curriculum that teaches media literacy in public schools faces obstacles in this current climate, where education has become political.
Born with no discrimination. So why should it be taught in school? Right? Hate and division is being taught by evil parents and evil teachers. And we need to stop that.
We've had educators who let us know that if they use a mainstream news source, that there will be some parents who perceive that as an ideological act or as a biased act on their part. So we try to help them navigate those situations by just, bringing them back to the core concepts that undergird our curriculum, which are the aspirational standards and ethics of quality journalism.
Peter Adams says media literacy should be part of the basic core curriculum in many subjects.
Science classes can be looking at mis and disinformation about climate change and GMOs and vaccines. Math classes can look at misrepresentations of data and misleading graphs. Social studies classes obviously have lots of opportunities to talk about the watchdog role of the press, to talk about historic news coverage, and English language arts classes can talk about things like tone and framing, perceptions of bias. So there are lots of opportunities sort of across the curriculum.
I think if I didn't have a government class or had my teacher talk to us about this, I don't think I would have registered to vote or voted.
Now I kind of look at things, twice. I look at the picture again. I see if there's, the same thing going on in other websites or other news articles.
There is wide agreement across federal agencies that disinformation campaigns pose serious threats to national security. Whose house? But in spring of 2022, when the Department of Homeland Security announced it was creating a governance board to monitor those threats,
the first bullet was about protecting privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties, and the First Amendment. They said the primary mission is to establish best practices to ensure that efforts to understand and respond to disinformation are done in ways that protect privacy, civil rights, and civil liberties.
It was immediately attacked.
I, like several members who've already spoken, can't begin to understand why you would want to announce the creation of a misinformation board. I think it's a terrible idea. It communicates to the world that we're going to be spreading propaganda within our country. It's an awful idea, and you ought to disband it.
Within weeks, the board was put on pause, and a month later, it was quietly scrapped. I interviewed the former head of the Disinformation Governance Board, Nina Jankowicz, shortly after.
I guess what we had here was the setting up of a body that was specifically tasked with not even it doesn't sound like doing anything particularly new, but certainly coordinating the efforts that were going on. And there weren't the steps put in place to make sure that body was protected from the inevitable backlash that anybody with any education on or any expertise on disinformation or extremism could have told them was coming. So that must be pretty disappointing.
Every lie, every piece of harassment, and frankly, every article that's written about the Disinformation Governance Board from that side of the media spectrum and political spectrum is based in this lie that it was going to adjudicate what was true or false online. That had no basis in reality, absolutely none. And nobody wants to hear the truth. You could be presented with a bunch of fact sheets. You could be presented with a bunch of debunks. As I mentioned before, the Associated Press even did one about my past statements that were taken out of context. People don't care. They've been told I'm evil. They've been told the Disinformation Governance Board was evil, and that's what they're going to believe. And that's a very, very sad state of discourse for our country, and makes me worried about what's coming for not only our elections, but kind of just interpersonal relations and every crisis that we're going to face, whether it's a school shooting or a natural disaster. How are we going to agree on the facts anymore?
I think many of us have seen the reports out of Russia, for example, that, Russia is engaged in this aggressive war, but many people in Russia still believe that, this is actually a defensive move, or that they're engaged in some sort of noble effort to rid a country that's, has a Jewish president of the Nazis that are running the country. So what's at stake? I know you spent a lot of time studying Russian disinformation. Is that too severe an example, or is that what we're headed towards?
Well, I think a lot depends on the political future of the country. So Russia has gotten to this point because over the last 30 years, the Russian political establishment led by Vladimir Putin has made sure that all independent media and opposition politics has been totally quashed in the country. There were moves by the Trump administration to defund outlets like NPR and PBS, to defund the nonpartisan Wilson Center, where I used to work, a think tank that really supports a lot of the big questions that Congress is asking and is relied upon by Democrats and Republicans alike, to defund that effort, to defund Voice of America and Radio Free Europe, which are America's equivalent to the BBC. So I think there is a possibility that if we are not vigilant, that some would want that sort of propaganda to exist in the United States, and that independent media might go away.
Do you think the truth will always win? Do you think it's going to win in this case?
It's hard for me to say that the truth will win from where I'm sitting right now. For 2 months, I have been attempting to convince my fellow Americans that I am not an evil disinformation czar, that I, went into public service to serve my country and to protect my country. And I think that's where we need a little bit more oversight, not necessarily censorship, certainly not, the removal of authentic speech by Americans, but at least a little oversight of the types of things that social media companies are surfacing, how they profit from it. Again, some regulations about how our elections are run. I think those are things that everybody should be grateful for, so we can ratchet down the temperature in the country and get back to discussions that are based in fact. And frankly, that are based in that mutual humanity that we all have. I think that's something that it should be an American value, and something that I'm going to continue working for to make sure that the truth can be as potent as it once was.
Freedom of speech, as enshrined in the First Amendment, is a bedrock of American democracy. But it's not absolute. According to the Cornell Law Institute, certain categories are exceptions. Radio and television have grappled with the issue of free speech since their inception. To address some of these concerns, in 1934, the Federal Communications Commission was formed. Its job was to regulate common carriers like broadcast TV and radio. But that all changed during the years President Ronald Reagan was in the White House under deregulation.
Let's turn to the future. It's widely said that America is losing her competitive edge. Well, that won't happen if we act now.
And it was in this era, on January 1st, 1983, that the internet was born. Today, the internet, especially social media, remains largely unregulated by the government.
We found ourselves unprepared and ill-equipped for the immensity of the problems that we've acknowledged. Abuse, harassment, troll armies, propaganda through bots and human coordination, misinformation campaigns, and divisive filter bubbles. That's not a healthy public square. If we don't find scalable solutions to the problems we're now seeing, we lose our business, and we continue to threaten the original privilege and liberty we were given to create Twitter in the first place.
Throughout history, every authoritarian regime has seized power, in part, by taking control of the media, taking control of news, taking control of information.
Carl Szabo represents a lobbyist organization that works on behalf of companies like Meta, Amazon, and TikTok.
But some in Washington want to put big government in charge of America's top innovators.
NetChoice ads claim any form of government oversight of big tech goes directly against core American values.
I can tell you that allowing government to decide what we hear and what we say is a potential outcome. But I can promise you that that cure is going to be much, much worse than the disease of some people occasionally seeing information that we as a society maybe don't want them to see.
The proposal to regulate tech platforms in any way is highly controversial.
If our focus is protecting the First Amendment and our rights to free speech, while very carefully regulating data privacy. I've heard there are a number of things that are being discussed in Congress. Everything from antitrust laws to calling Facebook a utility.
Suzanne Nossel of the free speech advocacy group PEN America says there is a way to protect both the First Amendment and social media users.
I think we definitely don't want to put government in the business of viewpoint-based determinations of what can stay or go on social media, but I think there are other forms of regulation that avoid content-specific, viewpoint-specific intervention in the marketplace of ideas that can help bring us toward a healthy ecosystem.
Emerson Brooking of the Atlantic Council says enforcing libel and defamation laws may also prove a powerful deterrent to the spreaders of disinformation.
After the 2012 massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary, which killed 20 children, conspiracy theorist Alex Jones spread lies for years about some of the parents who'd lost their children. And those parents banded together and they tried repeatedly to bring Jones to court.
I mean, ladies and gentlemen, listen, if you want to be bamboozled and lose your First Amendment and lose your Seventh Amendment and lose all that, go ahead. You're having your rights to a trial by jury to decide if you're guilty or innocent stolen from you.
In August, a jury in Austin, Texas determined Alex Jones must pay nearly $50 million in total damages.
That sort of process should be made easier. And when people have a bit more right or something that they can fall back to, it does disincentivize the spread of disinformation.
After talking to so many people about disinformation, it's obvious there are no easy solutions. How do we protect freedom of speech while keeping those most vulnerable from falling victim to dangerous propaganda? How do we make sure the internet is a safe playing field for everyone, including marginalized communities? It's a balancing act that we've got to get right, and there's a lot riding on it.